Hello everyone, I've had this motorcycle for a few months. I've put just about 5,000 miles on it, getting ready to roll that on the odometer. So I thought I would give you guys who are curious about the bike a little review. There are definitely some things that I like about this bike. There's definitely some things that I would change on this bike, and I will share those with you. I'll take about a minute and explain the video you're watching, and so you know what to look for. I'll tell you a little bit about myself so you can decide whether or not you even want to listen to my opinions, and then I will go right into the review. Now this review is for the FLSL Softail Slim, which started in 2018. Harley closed out their old design, which I believe was the Softail Slim S, in 2017. They worked on the frame, they put a new engine in it, and they did some redesigns. And presumably Harley's going to continue to manufacture this bike for another 10 years or so. So as long as you are wanting to know information on the FLSL Softail Slim, my opinions on this machine should carry over and have some weight. Right now we're heading south on Highway 83 towards a town called Leakey, Texas. Leakey is famous among Texas motorcyclists as being the hub of three twisty roads that are called the Twisted Sisters. Right now we're on top of what's called the Edwards Plateau, which is several thousand square mile geologic uplift west of Austin. We're getting ready to go off the southwestern end of it. There'll be an elevation change of 800 to 1,000 feet going down into the city. You'll be able to see the terrain change from the oaks you see here down to larger trees, and one reason is right now where we're at, the water table is 800, 1,000 feet down. But when you get off this plateau, suddenly there's not hundreds of feet of ground above the water, so it bubbles out into springs that form creeks, rivers, swimming holes. So Leakey and Camp Wood, that area is also known as the live water area of the Texas Hill Country. And right now it's 102 degrees, so the video is going to end. We're going to go for a swim in one of these clear rivers. One other thing to look for in the video before I move on to the review, this area of the state of Texas, about 100 years ago, people started importing deer and different kinds of animals from all over the world that promptly broke loose. So this area of the state has large, free-range, wild axis deer, blackbuck antelope, European fallow deer, many kinds of deer. I wasn't looking for them, but if you look around, you may see some of them. And if you do, you can let me know where you saw them. A little bit about myself. I consider myself to be an advanced beginner. Now, I got a motorcycle license about 10 years or more ago, and I haven't been on a bike in a while before I bought this one. I've been on Honda Rebels, been on the C50T, the Suzuki Touring motorcycle, the Sportster. There's another one I can't remember. Oh, the Street 500. And also when this bike was in for a 1,000-mile service, I test drove a Road King. Another thing that I use this bike essentially as a mini touring bike. I don't really go to bars on it. I don't go to coffee shops. I don't really commute to work. The few times I do commute to work, I take what's a 30-minute drive through the city and cut way out in the country and turn it into an hour and a half or 2-hour drive. So the way I use the bike may or may not fall in line with the way you would use it, and your experiences may vary. Finally, this is the first motorcycle that I've ever bought. All those other bikes I mentioned were either in classes or they were friends' bikes that they let me use so I could go ride with them. And this is the first one that I've actually laid my own money down and signed my own name to and bought, and I'll discuss those reasons before the end of the video. Now, one thing I really like about the FLSL is the classic styling that it has. When I went into the dealership, I didn't really look at the Sportsters, but I was looking at the Street Bob, and I was looking at the Lowrider and the Softail Slim. And quite frankly, because I had an idea that I would be taking rides like this one, if money was no object, I probably would have bought the Heritage Classic. But that was a little bit more money than I wanted to spend. But when I started looking at those three bikes, it didn't take me very long to narrow in on the Softail Slim as my favorite. It has the classic looks of a 1940-something motorcycle before the design started to morph off into the 60s and 70s style Harleys. I like that fat front tire. I like the 5-gallon tank. It especially comes in handy on trips like this one. And the bike itself just has a really classic look to it. And this color scheme, the black, the white, the chrome, I like it a lot. Other people compliment on it, and this motorcycle itself has a history that is a topic for another video. Now, moving into the first thing that I don't like about the bike, I'm going to tell you a lot of the things that I'm going to mention that I don't care for are minor annoyances, or they're things that are going to resolve themselves, except for this first one. And that is, I absolutely hate this factory seat. Now, it looks good. It goes great with the classic lines of the bike. I understand what they were trying to do with it, and I also understand that if Harley were to put a super comfy seat on the bike straight out of the factory, they couldn't sell you a better one later on. I mean, I get that. But that said, I'm 5'11", 6 foot, 220 to 230. I have a 33-inch inseam, and this seat is a pain. I can go about an hour on it, and I have to get off 2 hours, and I am DUN done, unless there's some pressing reason to continue on. I don't really want anything left to do with the bike. Now, I have tried a Sundowner seat as a loaner seat. It was a lot better, and I got a lot more ride out of it. But if you buy this bike, unless you're going to use it for short hops to bars or things like that, I cannot imagine that you're going to keep this factory seat around very long. In fact, I think I would probably get a new seat before I would even get new pipes. And that's going to take me into the next thing that I don't really care for about this bike right now, and this one will resolve itself over time. In fact, it may already have resolved itself by the time you're watching this video. And that is, the aftermarket on these things are terrible. The previous parts for the Softail Slim S, most of them will not fit this frame. They've made whatever adjustments they did that rendered those parts obsolete. And talking about the seats, right now the only people making seats are Harley, of course, and Saddlemen. Mustang doesn't make seats, and a lot of the other seat designers don't make seats. And not only that, I'll take it a step further. Not only is the aftermarket bad, but right now a lot of Harley dealers aren't even carrying parts in stock for the 2018 Softail Slim. I called around to several Harley dealerships looking for loaner seats, and I found one almost 40 miles from the house that had one, but the only one they had was the Sundowner. They didn't have a loaner hammock seat or any of the other seats. And the rest of the Harley dealerships I talked to did not keep any loaner items for the Softail Slim in stock. There are no third-party manufacturers of, for example, hard or locking saddlebags as we speak. And there's not even parts for things that other bikes have available. For example, the oil temperature gauge. There's not one available for the Softail Slim right now. And again, this is something that will resolve itself, and by the time you're watching this video, it may have already resolved itself, but it is a pain right now, and it is definitely a trial. Trying to think of things that I might want to do to the bike, and having really no resource other than the Harley catalog itself, and even the Harley catalog doesn't have all the things that I might be looking for. So that's one thing I don't particularly care for about the bike, in addition to the seat right now. Another thing I really like about the bike is the power that this bike has. They took a touring engine out of the previous year's models and put it in the Softail Slim line, which are lighter than the touring bikes to begin with, and then you get to the Softail Slim, which is even lighter than other Softails. So the power to weight ratio on this bike is very good for cruising style motorcycles. It's not a crotch rocket, but it has more power than you need. I don't know if you noticed, but on this highway the speed limit is 75 miles an hour, and on the highway before this the speed limit was 80 miles an hour. This bike has zero problems cruising at 75 or 80 miles an hour. And even at those speeds, if you need to crank the throttle to wind up to get around an 18-wheeler or something, you still have power in reserve. This bike, now it'll depend on the temperature and probably the altitude, but it gets about 70 miles an hour, I'm running about 2,500 RPMs. And at 80 miles an hour, I don't remember what the RPMs were, but they were still less than 3,000. So even at 75, 80 miles an hour, you're still on the front side of the power curve for the engine, and you still have power in reserve. Now, you can't get the 114 engine in the Softail Slim. I'm not sure if you can get a stage 4 conversion for the 107. According to Matt Laidlaw's video, if you get a stage 4 upgrade, you get a 50% increase in torque and 50% increase in power. If you were to do that to this motorcycle, you would have a 600-pound crotch rocket. I don't know why anybody would need to do that. This bike has more power than you need, and like I said, it has plenty in reserve. That said, I'm not sure that this is a good bike for beginners. And I say that because, again, I hadn't been on a motorcycle in several years. And when I first started riding this bike on mall parking lots, on quiet back roads, getting familiar with motorcycling in general and this motorcycle in particular, there were a few times that first couple of weeks when I wondered if I had bitten off more than I can chew. For example, this motorcycle, if you crank the throttle an eighth or a quarter inch farther than you intended to, you better be holding on because you're going. And also, you better hope that there's not a friend's motorcycle or a car or something that you can hit in front before you can gather your senses and get off the throttle. Now, after a few weeks, all the old skills started coming back. I got used to it. But because of the adventures I had getting back in the saddle for the first time in years with this bike in particular, I was way overcautious, understanding my own limitations, and it is just my opinion that unless you have some background on motorcycles, if you're just going to take the motorcycle safety foundation class and then try and get on it, this is probably not a good bike for you for that reason, if no other. And compared to the other motorcycles I've been on, again, the power in reserve, from what I remember about the Sportster and even the C50T, when you get it up to 70, 75 miles an hour, you are really winding that engine up at 2,500 RPMs. You know, that's a good cruising speed for the engine and good marathon pace. It's certainly not a sprint. You're certainly not overworking the engine, even on long drives. Since I did a couple of negatives in a row, I'll do a couple of positives in a row. Another thing that I really like about this Softail Slim, in addition to the power and the styling, is it handles really, really well. It's not as agile as a sport bike, of course, but that's an apples to orange comparison. But it doesn't fight you in the corners. You have to give it a little nudge to turn like you want it to, but once you get it set up, it doesn't want to continue leaning. It doesn't want to come back up on you. It stays exactly where you want it to be until you give it a little nudge and it stands back up. It hasn't given me any surprises. It hasn't given me any nasty habits. It hasn't given me anything at all to make me think anything other than this is just a smooth riding. It's definitely more maneuverable than a Road King, and it's more maneuverable from what I remember than the C50T, the Suzuki touring bike. And I think the maneuverability it has is more predictable and more stable than even the Sportsters. Over the last 5,000 miles, it just has exhibited no bad habits and given me no reason to really be wary of this particular model versus any of the others. On the contrary, it's actually been a really pleasurable bike to ride and become reacquainted with motorcycling. Now, one thing that has been a minor irritation on this motorcycle, and it's probably true across all the Softails, and it may be true of all motorcycles in general, if you look down, that chrome on the top of the front fork, anytime between about 11 o'clock in the morning, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun's generally high, there is no direction you can drive where you don't get a bright, brilliant reflection right up into your eyes. That may have been true on those other motorcycles I was on, but I don't really remember that. Of course, some of them had windshields and some of them had handlebar bags, and they were different designs. But this one definitely, if you're going to ride any of the Softails, you're going to need some sunglasses, or you're going to need a tinted visor. You're going to need something to just for road safety and also to not burn your retina out. I haven't really figured out what the solution to this is yet. I know it's probably pretty simple, but that might be something that you want to think about if you have really sensitive eyes. Another thing that I have mixed feelings about are the spoked wheels on this bike. Now, I love the way the spoked wheels look. They have that classic look that went with this classic design. I get that. But one of the things I started thinking about on this ride, now this particular highway isn't really deserted, but later on I was on some pretty desolate stretches of road where there were not many people coming. And I started thinking that if I had a flat, since I was out of cell phone reception out in this area of the state, that I might find myself in a pickle. If I didn't have a spoked wheel, and I say this because I'm assuming that since it's a spoked wheel, it has a tube in it. If I had a regular metal wheel, then I could at least have the option of plugging a hole and doing an emergency refill of air till I could get to a service station. And I don't really think that's an option with tube tires. So if you're going to be somewhere out in desolate areas where the help might not be really close or where people may not be going, I don't really know if spoked wheels are going to be the best option, and they may not even be the best option for me. Now, there's some parts of this country where there are no roads like I described. Every road that you're on is going to have people traveling on it and good cell reception, so it may not be a non-issue. But like I said, I have mixed feelings about spoked wheels because of this particular trip that we're on right now, at least the stretches after the video. And I'm not entirely sure whether spoked wheels are the best kinds of wheels to have on trips like this. Now, a couple of other things that I've actually enjoyed more than I thought I was going to. The first is this bike actually has a gas gauge on it. So it is really nice if you want to know how much gas you have to just glance down and look instead of having to keep track off of an odometer. Now, this gas gauge seems like it reads a little bit low, which is much better than having it read a little bit high. But it is nice to just glance down. And in addition to a gas gauge, it's got a range calculator. And when you get below 1 gallon of gas, there's a low fuel light that comes on to let you know that in the next 40 miles or 50 miles or so, you're going to be out of gas. On the topic of gas, I think Harley advertises about 47 miles to the gallon for this bike. In the city, I'm getting about 45, and when I'm doing easy cruising on the highway, which I refer to as 60 to 65 miles an hour, I get about 55 or 56 miles to the gallon. Now, that definitely doesn't apply going 75 and 80. I'm not sure what the mileage on that is. I didn't calculate it, but it's nice to have a vehicle that the mileage meets or exceeds what the manufacturer says it would. Another thing that I saw no point in, but I've ended up using, as you can see in this video, is the FLSL has a USB power port underneath the gas tank. And I couldn't really see any use for that to begin with, but if you notice that silver cord on top of the gas tank, what that is I'm running a power cord up from the USB port into the GoPro camera on my helmet. And when you do that, the GoPro never runs out of battery. So if you have a 128 gig card, you can record 7 or 8 hours of video. If you can get a bigger card than that in, I have no idea how much video you'll get. But you will stop filming when you run out of disk space, not when you run out of battery life. And that has turned into a really good asset to have on these longer rides, being able to have a camera that's going to go and go and go. So while I initially did not know what to think about that USB port, it's ended up being a pretty handy feature of the bike. Now, I am not a die-hard Harley fan, although I'm more of a fan now than I was before I bought the motorcycle. I may have bought any of those other bikes that I mentioned, but in reality, because I hadn't ridden in so long and I'd never owned a motorcycle myself, I wasn't sure how much I was going to like it. So I started looking for a bike that if I were to sell a year later held the highest resale value, and that pretty much narrowed it down to Harleys. not only have I been riding the bike, I've had it a few months and put 5,000 miles on it, and I'm not sure if I've made my fourth payment on it yet, element. But not only have I ridden it a lot, I've actually enjoyed it 1,000 times more than I actually thought I would. And I think a lot of that has to do with the bike itself, the power that it has, the great handling characteristics and the benign habits, the nice stability it has. Even with the seat and even with the glare and, some of the other issues that I've talked about in this video, I still say that I have enjoyed this bike way more than I ever expected to, and I'm probably not going to sell it now. And like I said earlier, since it's about 102 degrees out, I'm going to be pulling over and we're going to go for a swim in this nice, cool, spring-fed river. I hope my information and my opinions have proved helpful for you if you were looking for a good 5,000-mile review of the FLSL. And I'm not down here very often, but I'll see you on the roads of Texas in general and the roads of North Texas in particular.